Thank you, everyone, and welcome to our session this morning. We hope for many of you, it's welcome back to what is a third stop along a collective journey, which we began several months ago. Together, as it should be, we continue our conversation about our greatest possibilities, both through collective action and with a backdrop of a historic awakening and political opening. Even if I can't see you, I'm glad we're together again and that you chose to continue to travel along with us. If this is your first time here, we're grateful you're here and to now be in relationship with you. If you enjoy being with us today, we invite you to travel back in time, watch our first two events, and join the hundreds of others who have participated in those shared experiences. To introduce myself formally, my name is Lugay, and I serve on the fan club of each of the people you'll be hearing from over the next 50 minutes or so, and we'll be asking questions that I could honestly listen to each of them answer over and over again. Today, we'll start the same way we started last time, because what if in an era of innovation and exceptionalism, the interventions we need most can be found in more repetition and more practice, in the ways we check in on our friends, both when they're doing well and when they're struggling, in the ways we kiss our kids goodbye when they leave the house or goodnight before we close their door, or in the ways we pause and listen and share our attention with one another. I invite everyone who's joined us on this call today to get in a comfortable position, letting go of anything in your hands, of anything distracting you, to close your eyes and relax in your breath. Now I invite you to remember back to a younger version of yourself, specifically one without the politics and perhaps values that you have today. Maybe it's your college self, maybe it's your high school self. A version of yourself much earlier in your civic and political journeys. It might even be a version of yourself you would be a little embarrassed to have share their political point of view with everyone here today. Now remember some of the people who came into your life and helped shape you and move you from that younger version of yourself to who you are today. They could be partners or professors, a classmate or colleague, friends or family members, organizers, or even elected officials. Think specifically of one of those people who played a significant role in moving you forward in your political journey. Now, if you happen to have closed your eyes, find a pen, a piece of paper, a Post-it, and just write down thank you and the name of the person you just thought of. Normally, we would be doing this in person, in space together, and we would go into breakout rooms. We'd go into triads, and I would allow each of you to introduce yourselves to one another and to the space, leading with gratitude by going around and saying thank you, that person's name you just wrote down, and why you are thanking them as if they were in the room. In lieu of this, and given the size of this group, I'll invite our newest guest to this collective journey to share their gratitude. And so I'll ask Ciciley, then Linda, then Louis, then Timmy to say thank you, name the person they're thanking, and yeah, thank them for what they've meant to you.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you so much for inviting me and Louis, my partner, to be part of this conversation today. And of course, thank you to the Philanthropy Together team for creating this space for us to be able to share today. I, as you see, am Ciciley Moore. And today I want to say thank you to my mother. I think when we talk about political journeys, there are many people that I would thank along that journey. But I think what's really core to those relationships for me has been about courage and belonging. And my mother, who was the oldest of 6 kids growing up in Salinas, California, spent her entire lifetime dedicated to nurturing many before herself. And she was my first example of living authentically and putting your wholeheartedness into every action, and really showed me how to stand fully in my Blackness and Latinidad. And it's because of her that my roots are deep enough to stand through many seasons. And that strength I carry with me in raising my own children as well. I lost my mom to breast cancer 10 years ago. But again, that way that she centered me, bringing me up, has been my anchor as I've begun my own political journey. So I thank my mother for where I am today.
Thank you, Ciciley. Linda?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I want to thank Anna Jackson, who was my RA the summer before I started undergrad at Stanford. I was doing my last summer program at the UC Davis Upward Bound program. And I still don't know what it is that she saw in me and made this suggestion, but she told me to look up grassroots organization when I got to the Bay Area. And those two words have changed my life. You know, I've never heard those words before. And I'm like, I don't know what this is. But when I opened my course catalog, looking for classes, and I saw a class on Asian American history and activism, um, it spoke to me. And I think she opened me up to it and opened me up to a new set of ideas that I didn't even know existed. And on a life path that I could not have imagined when I was 17, going on 18. It changed my life. So thank you, Anna.
Thank you. Louis?
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is actually the first time I've been invited into CC's space. So I am really excited and I'm nervous because I don't want to blow this opportunity. The person I'd like to thank, just like CC, is my mother. She passed in September. And one of the things, if you can notice the mess behind me, I'm not saying my mom was messy, but there's a lot of books. I'm a history professor. And I get that from my mom. And one of the books that she actually sent to me within the last year, actually sent me all my stuff, like my baseball cards and everything, was this book right here that I used to look at all the time. It's called it's all torn up and I'm not getting a new one. It's called The Black Quest. It's about Black cowboys. And I would just sit there as a young kid and go through it. And that was my introduction into the Black past, into Black history. And that's what I wanted to do, right? Once, and Cece knows, once we met at college, that's it. That's all I've ever wanted to do was study Black history. So I'd like to thank my mom for giving me that, and that, and you know, especially having that book to this day is important to me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Timmy?
Hi, everyone. My name is Timmy. Use he, him pronouns. And the person that I'd like to thank, his name is Tim Lee. And so Lee is basically like an older brother, a mentor for me in the organizing spaces. Like I've learned that organizing is about making the ask, just like fundraising, and to never say no for someone else. And Lee made all of the asks that made me the organizer I am today. He asked me to join one of my first electoral campaigns, defending tenant protections in East Palo Alto, where I drove 80 miles in a 3 square mile city on election day. He asked me to skill up on data for political campaigns, which I did do that, and I gave up a trip to Comic-Con in San Diego for that purpose. And he asked me to become executive director of my current organization, AAPIs for Civic Empowerment. And he never hesitated to make the ask, but he also never hesitated to take the time to really think about what type of contribution I could make into the movement. And I really, thank him for that, and try to model my own leadership around that.
Thank you, Timmy. For those who weren't with us last time, we do this exercise for a few reasons when introducing people to social justice. First, because one of the greatest dangers we face in this work is falling towards self-righteousness. To ever act as if we were born with the politics and values we have today, to use social justice as a weapon rather than as an invitation to people still early in their political journeys. This exercise serves as a reminder that we weren't born with these politics or values by reminding us of a time before we had them, and that if we ever did act as if we were, we would in some ways be making the person we just thanked invisible. A second reason we like to do this exercise is because one of the things that most captivated me about community organizing and social movements was its concern for legacy as much as impact. Impact might be the law you get passed, the resources you mobilize, the campaigns you win, but your legacy as an organizer is about whether or not in an exercise like this, 20 years from now, someone will be thanking you for your impact on them. Our legacy as organizers is tied to the personal transformation you allow others to have and the ways you allow this to transform you. Lastly, I want to do this here in this session as we consider social justice and giving circles, to introduce the idea of time and space and the beautiful network of relationships that make us distinctly human. To end this exercise, I now ask our participants, and many of you on this webinar listening live, to, in the spirit of mutuality with the speakers, type into the chat, thank you, and the name of the person you just thought of. And as you all do that, I'm just going to share quickly our design considerations for this, and also just a quote I recently found. So I want to be transparent about how we are designing this. First, they say we design for everyone, then you often end up designing for no one. So for our purpose, we have been designing for those of you on this call still early in your political journeys. We want to honor your impulse and desire to contribute to and participate in social justice movements and the ways they shape and reshape society. We can't wait to see what impossible things will help to make real together, and don't hesitate to reach out to us. We created a Gmail account, which Joelle will be sharing later, and we will be happy to respond to you. Second, the reason we accepted this invitation to participate in the Social Justice Giving Circle project is because of what makes Giving Circles so captivating from a social justice perspective, which is not the money, but the intimacy between its members who explicitly want to use their agency to affect change in the world, and in building relationships to fulfill that desire. Intimacy is the seed from which you want collective action to grow, and it's only ever collective action that changes the world. It's why we brought together individuals in our first session who have long worked together, and why we bring together today people in partnership with in parenthood with one another, and who will be touching on the topic of love along political journeys, something that sometimes feels like it gets lost in the professionalization of so much of this work. And lastly, as I mentioned, these are speakers I love and admire. The last thing I would want is for this webinar to be another exercise in consumption, as so often happens, with the audience only considering the value of the content that's being shared. This last design consideration is actually an invitation to you all watching, maybe an ask, to not just listen, but to experience who Ciciley and Linda and Louis and Timmy and Joelle and Seiji are as individuals, as members of the beloved community, and to consider whether these are the types of people you might want to spend more time with, or even want to become more like, as I have. Each of our events are as much about storytelling and sharing as they are meant to be instructional. In another era, gatherings like this would happen in living rooms with food and drinks and friends of friends coming together. And at the center of them were endless conversations and debates about how the world was, is, and how you wish it to be, and the strategies and approaches to get us to our next future. Today, we'll see how far we can get with the limited time that we have, but no worries. I've always found it helpful, maybe freeing in the way abundance is, to imagine that whoever we meet in life will meet again. And our hope, I think, for myself and all of the speakers today, is that we'll meet all of you again soon. With that, thank you for sharing your thank yous in the chat. If we are grateful that each of you are here with us today, we're also grateful for all the people that you just thanked and their role. And my thanks to your mom, Ciciley, to Ann Jackson, to your mom, Louis, to Lee Tim Lee, for their role in my meeting each of you. And with that, I'm going to allow introductions to happen. And then the way that we're going to do this is to allow partners to introduce each other. So let's go in the same order, if we might. Ciciley.
Yes, thank you, Mario, again for bringing us and centering our humanity in this conversation today. I am really happy to introduce my partner, Louis. And while today might be the first time that our worlds collide on Zoom, we have been in partnership for nearly 23 years. We met 23 years ago in the dorm room cafeteria at Sacramento State when we were undergrads. And being in partnership with Louis for over half of my life, there are many things that I could share about him today, but what I've always admired most about him is his sense of purpose. He's a full professor now, history professor, and I still remember those early days and walking on campus when his aspirations were to become a high school history teacher. And that dedication and sense of purpose to be an educator and to educate young minds is still who he is today. He had many opportunities to be redirected in his career, but he stays true to that, opportunity to really be an educator. As he mentioned before, his mom is his anchor, and I give praise to her often because she raised Lewis and his 3 siblings as a single mom and was an incredible nurturer to all that she touched. And today I see that showing up in Lewis in many ways, in the way that he supports me, in the way that he supports our 3 children now. And I just admire that presence in the way that he shows up for our family. He's things you should know about him. He's a budding gardener. He's a vinyl record collector, as you can see behind him. Why we're not sitting together today. He's a dad, a coach, an author, a civil rights and sports historian. And I can always count on Lewis to make sure that I know the historical truths about the TV shows that we watch together. And others can count on him too to bring that presence. Like when we visited the Muhammad Ali Museum in Louisville, and he noticed that one of the t-shirts was factually, historically incorrect, and had them correct that, and they thanked him. So that's the way that Lewis shows up, and eternally grateful to have a partner for as long as I have in Lewis. So I'll turn it over.
Thanks. Actually, let's turn over to Lewis. Let's have partners go in order.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I was so unprepared for that. So yeah, I did correct the Muhammad Ali Museum and they took that shirt off. So that is a true story. And I'll start introducing Cece with a story about our dorm days. And it was like when we first met, and she was I think a computer science major or something. It was one of those things. She was into the sciences. And I actually went to one of her, I don't know what science people do, I'm a historian, but one of those things that the science people do after class, and they were trying to figure out how to make some light turn red. And I'm sitting there just studying for my history exam. And then I played with the little gadget and turned it red and, just let them know I know what I'm doing. But she used to make fun of me reading all the time. That's all I do. And then my favorite part about her is that she is turned into a real life intellectual. She's a very brilliant person. I know that because even though this is our first time on Zoom together, I'm always eavesdropping because I literally have nothing to do. And so I'll go upstairs and just listen to hear what you guys are talking about. And I'm like, man, she is so brilliant. And sometimes I ask her like to explain to me things because the way she's able to explain like complicated concepts really helps me out in my work. And then I'll just steal what she says and pass it on as my own when I'm teaching. One of the things that I love about her is that we get each other about when our son was born. So he just turned 10. He was in the NICU for about 2 weeks, and there was a younger couple in there with us. And one of the things they said to us, because we were sitting down like reading, and they were like playing video games on their phone, and they said, all you guys do is read. And it was like a comment to me. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. Like, that's what we like to do. And now for the last 10 years, every day we see each other reading. That's exactly what we say to each other. Is that all you do is read? And my favorite part about that is a couple weeks ago, and I don't know if this shows how connected we are or disconnected we are sometimes, is that we actually bought and ordered the same book within a few days, and we put it on our bookshelf. So I was like, wait a minute, I just ordered that. But I love that she's a lifetime learner, and I love that she's really into the stuff, like the history, right? It might come from a different perspective, right? Trying to read about Black giving and philanthropy, but I love, and she'll sit down and watch these shows with me, and she'll just let me be corny and point out all the flaws and actually still watch them with me.
That's awesome. Thank you. Linda or Timmy, I'll let either one of you go first.
I can start. Yeah, thank you, Mario, for bringing us all together. I love meeting folks who have roots in Sacramento. And yeah, just grateful for the connection with Cece and Lewis. So this is Timmy. previously known as Tim, never Timothy. In another life, he was Tim. Right before I met him, he changed his name back to his given name of Timmy. He is an ENTP Sagicorn, born in the year of the pig, and loves to talk about how he's from Baldwin Park, hometown of In-N-Out Burger, right outside of LA, and where he likes to call storm drain rivers. I grew up in Sacramento. We have real rivers that are kind of scary. He's a Lakers fan, a Clippers fan, he swears, but I know deep down he's really rooting for the Lakers, and we really bonded over our love of basketball in the early 2000s when we met in college. He used to be the family DJ until our daughter supplanted him. So now we mostly listen to truck tunes and songs about construction vehicles. Highly recommend 20 Trucks. Yeah, our lives have been like really interlinked, I think. Actually, we are in each other's spaces a lot. He got his professional career started at the Asian Pacific Environmental Network, where I interned for 2 summers. We work with a lot of the same people, so we try to set boundaries on when we're allowed to talk about work and when we're not. But this is actually our first time ever speaking on a panel together. So I appreciate this opportunity. And I'll have to tell you, the first time I saw Timmy talk about electoral work, I was like, oh, wow, you really know what you're talking about. I was very impressed. It's really beautiful to watch. And it's really actually beautiful to watch him cultivate in other people this like really deep belief in building nonprofit and C4 organizations that build Asian American electoral power. And just really amazed to witness his work in helping win Georgia in this last winter, and just the support that he's offered to so many people across the country as they're navigating this world and the contradictions that come with electoral organizing. So, and he's a great parent and partner. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Linda.
I'll just say this Timmy person sounds really great. I should get to know him. But as for Linda, there are few people in the world who have put as much work into making me a better person, a better organizer, and a better parent than Linda Lee. There are few people who have the organization building instincts that Linda Lee has. I think Linda Lee's expertise in building an organization came from an early age, being one of 11 siblings. Basically, she has managed a mid-sized organization her entire life. She has learned a thing or two about conflict, building unity, love through and because of struggle. She's a refugee, a Hmong woman. She's grown up poor. She's lived the impacts of war, imperialism, patriarchy, capitalism. And I think in her current role, ironically, at a Chinese American organization, the Hmong staff person in leadership at a Chinese American organization, she's built that organization from like a small team to, I mean, basically in the ecosystem, like dozens, hundreds of employees, staff, and trying to come up with systems that kind of serve everybody in that. Linda's love language is Excel spreadsheets and pivot tables. Her work is centered on building movement leaders. She has personally trained hundreds of Asian American movement leaders, young people. I can safely say there is no one who gives better gifts than Linda Lee. And if you have received a gift from Linda Lee, then you know how good she is at it. And gosh, she loves her crime procedural dramas, as problematic as they are. She's very, very good at guessing who done it. So yeah, that's Linda Lee. She is all that and a bag of hot Cheetos.
Thank you, Timmy. Thank you all. That was incredible. We've never tried this before, and that was just wonderful. In addition to giving ourselves the opportunity to feel your love for one another and bring that into this space, I think our ability to actually introduce others, particularly those we love and appreciate, is such a key function in social justice movements. It's something that if you do this work, you'll learn to do and hope to learn to love to do. For fundraisers, and actually a lot of community organizers being able to share our community stories is often cited as the greatest privilege of doing this work. So thank you all for both modeling love and modeling how we share each other's stories. The other thing about social justice movements is it's an invitation into what I would argue are the most captivating conversations. It's an invitation to be in dialogue with people across space and time, and allowing that dialogue to reshape and to reshape who we are. To that end, each of the 4 speakers have been invited to choose clips from our first dialogue to share with you. I'll play these and then invite the speakers to be in dialogue with them. And so please bear with me as I do this technically. We're going to go just based on the link, CC, Lewis, and then Linda and Timmy. And
find refuge, where we can refuel, reimagine, and conspire with others, where we put into practice what we say we believe in, where you find your people who commit to having your back, where we promise not to leave anybody behind, and where we meet you where you're at and support you to enter and engage at multiple levels. That's not to say that there isn't internal struggle or that it's all smooth sailings or that we don't, have our own contradictions and have missteps, but that's the intention. And it's worth a shot to try to find and build political home.
I'll pause there. Sorry, Cici, I forget where our stopping points are. Yeah, I invite you to share why you chose that quote.
Yeah, so I really connected with what Marissa had to share. She began sharing and talking about getting oriented in the battlefield and the space that her organization, Mi Gente, was at in finding their own pathway and utilizing some models, coming out of Chile's resilient work, and understanding that there are different arenas in which to contest for power, finding your place, finding your vibe, whether that's policy or corporate campaigns, our electoral work, in mutual aid and healing, justice art, all of the different avenues, right? And for me, it reminded me of, my own experience in my political journey, which really had a growth spurt about 13 years ago when Lewis and I relocated from California to Michigan to pursue his career and as a history professor. And really, those are the moments in your life when you have to, figure out where you belong, right? And it was an opportunity for me to not only get oriented to our new community, but really think about those spaces that we belong. If you know anything about West Michigan or Michigan in general, that culture is very different than the places that we were coming from in Sacramento, California, and growing up in various places in Northern and Southern California. And Lewis and I at the time had just had our first child. And we were coming into this place, trying to find our places to belong. And it was a journey. And it was a journey of figuring out not only what I wanted to be part of, but who I was. And I think in building that pathway, there was some discovery, there was some uncertainty, there was, building networks and friendships. And I really feel like I am just like one of the most fortunate people because early on in being in Michigan, I had the privilege to first meet a woman by the name of Stacy Stout. And soon after, Rebecca Velasquez Publes, Melinda Yasasi, and Allison Lugo Knapp, who were the founders of the Latina Network of West Michigan. And the Latina Network of West Michigan, the goal is to be a collective to lift Latina women leadership by serving as catalysts for systemic change through leadership development, but also finding our cultural belonging and reclaiming our narrative about who we are in our community. And that was necessary work within the city of Grand Rapids, where we live currently. And, you know, it really changed me in building friendships, relationships, being part of that network, where I was able to really anchor myself in building the kind of community that I wanted to belong to, that I bring my family into, that my children are being raised along with their families as well. And critical to know what my space was. I think one of the things also coming out of the year 2020 that I continues to be a learning for me is that there are many lanes, right? And so I work in philanthropy. I work for the W.K. Kellogg Foundation as a program officer. And, you know, philanthropy is a pathway to really show up, right? Especially when we're experiencing times of intense crisis and harm. And, you know, there's a lot of growth and opportunity within philanthropy to do that, but it's not the only way. There are many ways for organizing. And maybe your lane is, you know, being a protester, being out there in the streets. Maybe your lane is in counseling. Maybe your lane is in art activism. Maybe your lane is just like living for today, right? But you don't have to feel guilty about not occupying every single one of those spaces. We need all of those lanes. We need all of those avenues. We need to be able to find our places where we feel most connected, and I think most critically accountable to the growth, to you know, the resistance to the opportunities to advance social justice, to those issues that are critically you know, important to us personally, but also to our communities as a collective, right? So again, really connected with what Marissa had to say, because it is a pathway that I also had to discover for myself.
That's awesome. Thank you. As one of my mentors said, there's a role for everyone, and everyone has a role in the movement, to your point. Louis, I'll be playing your clip next.
Because organizations, right? That is huge. So we are making history, and we are doing it because organizations who were doing this individually and in isolation came together and collectively applied our imagination, our creativity to transform the world that we saw needed to be transformed on a smaller level. In New York City alone, the people that you see on this particular screen.
I think that was the full clip, right, Louis?
Yeah. So I chose that for several reasons. One, he said history. But last week, when we were in our prep, Mario brought up, you know, the Montgomery boycott, right? And how he wants to do this kind of deep dive. And I said, yeah, I mean, in my head, I said, well, if you think about it, right, how do you organize 60,000 people in 5 days? Right now, typically when we think Montgomery, we think a few names: Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., right? But we leave out the fact that someone like a Joanne Robinson, right, has organized the Women Political Council, and it was her and her group who were able to print off 40,000 flyers, right? They're able to go to churches. When we think about Black orgs and how do you mobilize people, right? And it's the success of all those little groups forming into one group, the MIA, Montgomery Improvement Association, which gets us desegregation of public transportation, the buses. And it's a year-long process, as Mario brought up in our chat, about organizing food, cars, making sure people, you know, got tires, every little thing they were able to do. And that's the civil rights movement. But most importantly, that's Black history. Now, we don't talk about it like that because we, you know, if you're teaching a class, you only have so much time, right, to deal with it, and we go with the big things. But from the beginning, right, Black history, Black survival, the fight for equality has always been about organizations, right? Whether we're talking about rebellions, like and he brought up New York and police brutality, but the 1712 slave rebellion, right? It's Akan speakers getting together, right, trying to literally burn down New York. And the reaction to that from New York was, oh, we got to stop them from organizing. How do you do that, right? If we look at our laws, I know critical race theory is in the discussion all the time, but if we look at our laws about people getting together, right? How many groups how many people are allowed to get together, whether it's at the mall today or just when we talk about in the 1700s, right? A lot of that results from how do you stop people from organizing, because there's power in organizing, right? And so New York said no more than 3 Black people getting together at the same time unless they have special permission from their masters. And we see that through all the colonies, right? If we move forward, even movements like Back to Africa movements in the early 1800s, right? These are organizations for freedom. Now, those who didn't go back to Africa, like with someone like a Paul Cuffey, who eventually they're going to try to start Liberia, they stayed because they wanted to organize to free other people. If we fast forward to post-emancipation, we know the power of organizations because we know the places that were attacked the most. Churches and schools were the places where Black folks were organizing, right? And so when Mario brought up this idea of Montgomery, or that speaker brought up about the history of organizing, how we could push police reform, my ears perked up, right? I said, this is what we do. This is how we get free in a society. And there are all types of stories, right? If we look at, let's say, Freedom Summer of 1964, it's COFO, right? It is a group of, it's groups, NAACP, it's SNCC, it's CORE, it's local organizers in Mississippi coming together and say, you know what, on the one hand, we're going to make sure that Black folks have the right to vote, right? And by that time, 1964, 5% of Black Mississippians had the right to vote, right? Within a year, you had the Voting Rights Act, right? Not only that we're going to give Black folks an education, right? And they start freedom schools, but it only happens because of the ability to tap into organizations that were already there. And so one of the things I love to study and love to teach is what happens on the ground level, right? And to close this, one of the things I do is sports, and I do sports and activism. And one of the people that we talk about a lot is Colin Kaepernick, right? How can you not talk about it? And he's in that book, shameless plug. It's only in the epilogue. He's only in the last few paragraphs because there's so many other people to talk about. So We Will Win the Day. It's right there underneath that De La Soul album, the original, by the way. And one of the things that gets me about him, that's so smart that others didn't do before him, was being able to see the power in grassroots organizations, right? Then Linda brings this up. And when he's giving his $1 million, that's what he's doing, because he realizes that there are already orgs on the ground ready to go right now. And all they need is resources. They don't need Colin Kaepernick to come in and sit down with them and tell them what they do. They need Colin Kaepernick and his millions of dollars and his followers to help them out, right? And that's where we've been really the last 50 plus years, right? One of the things I talk about in class are these things called community action programs, right? What comes out of the war on poverty is not an end to poverty, but it is the federal government, right, providing money and opportunity for community orgs to organize themselves and fight the city power. The reaction to that, whether you're in Chicago, LA, or Oakland, is to shut them down, right? Because there's so much power in community organizations. And I'll stop there.
That's awesome. Thank you. And if folks need someone to watch the NBA playoffs with, I'd recommend following Professor Moore's Twitter. Great. We might have to speed this up a little, but still want to give everyone time. And so, Linda, I'm playing your clip at 1.5 speed.
Also continue to transform ourselves. I feel like that's part of the question. I think the last thing is part of Mario's question was what do movements ask from people? And I think that part of what those of us who are participating in movements ask of each other is to try to take risks. That doesn't mean to do things that we can't do. That doesn't mean to do things that we're not comfortable with, but to take risks in the service of building a world that we want to live in, where everyone is free and has their basic needs met.
Thank you, Jihan. With that, I'll turn it over to Eric.
So one of the things that I really appreciated about my time working with my comrades, my fellow panelists today, was their appreciation for the different energies that a movement takes. And what I mean by that is, I think the long meetings we had often had to do with how we sustain what I'm going to call the insurrectionary energy of people at a given moment, while at the same time moving towards something that is about knowing what we want. And without drawing too sharp a distinction, I do want to say that there is like this unpredictable moment when things just kind of break open. And we saw that this spring, right? Where people feel this insurrectionary energy, this insurrectionary joy that we as organizers couldn't really predict, but it happens. And then as organizers, as people who believe in organization, we then want to find a way to move that to the next level, as it were, to kind of develop goals or demands or key strategies. And that's important. That's the work. But there might be a tension between that and sustaining the insurrectionary energy, right? Like too much consolidation, too many meetings, too much codification might take us away from the joy, the kind of ecstatic nature of just being in insurrectionary mode, which oftentimes is about not really knowing what comes next or not knowing exactly what you want, right?
I'm gonna pause it there. I forgot where we were supposed to stop. Linda?
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Mario. What I really appreciated about Eric's comments and reflections, it actually took me back to like the moments where I was grappling with these questions of like after Obama got elected and all these people like mobilized to like help get him elected, or Occupy, or Black Lives Matter, in this current moment of like different movement moments that activated thousands of people, millions of people across the country. And like this question of like, what do we do with all that energy? How do you get people plugged into movements? And you know, as reflecting too, is like, okay, like we're really good. We have gotten really good and really trained at like making our plans. But at the end of the day, it's like, how are we going to be present with the people who are right in front of us? How do we create movements that are expansive enough for people to move in between? Sometimes you have to leave. You can't be in the thick of it. And other times, like you're ready to go. But it's scary, right? It's like really scary to, can be very intimidating to be a part of this work. So how do we create movements that feel accessible? That can meet people where they're at, and you know, as CC said, like, and as others have said, like, where people can play different roles and be, and in those roles feel a sense of belonging. That this is the fight that they are a part of, and I feel like, you know, for me, like I have developed a sense of self and sense of awareness and understanding of my role because of the people who invested in me. And it required, and that's what it takes. And I think that's something that I also really value in my relationship with Timmy, is this shared value that we can play a role in nurturing other people in becoming a part of these movements and feeling that they belong.
Thank you. Next up is Timmy's clip. And
in that the love that we're talking about is not something that is experienced immediately. That's something that's earned, and it's earned by experiencing the struggles of campaigns, everything that comes with that, the victories, the defeats, the critiques, all of that. Over time, the kind of relationships that are created, that are the bonds that are made, is where you find that love. It's not something that you just, you know, you enter something and you expect it to be, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. Like anything worthwhile, it's earned. It's earned. So I wanted to make sure we share that, because you know, people can become discouraged with the defeats, with the challenges that are sure to come. Because if it does not come, you're doing something wrong. You're doing something wrong. If everything is always victories, you're always right. No, I don't know about that. Something's not right. But when you get bruised knees together, when you get knocked upside your head together, when you do all of these things together, that's where the love exists. That's where the bonds, the connections that you have to people exist. The fact that all of us come from a very small but really tight-knit coalition that people on the outside thought was an organization in itself, you know, really speaks to the kind of bonds that were created. You know, when I would say that, yeah, I actually trust Ju-Hyun with my life, I trust Eric with my life, I trust Priscilla with my life, it's not something I would just say. It's
great, Terry.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Mario. And I think what I love about this clip is that it is about love, right? And I think it can speak to, it speaks to the relationship that the romantic relationship that I have with Linda. It also speaks to the love for my colleagues and coworkers and the spaces that we're trying to build with each other. But it's also a reminder that, like, you know, that piece around love being earned really speaks to me too, because it is like doing work in the movement. It is not easy. We struggle with each other, we lose campaigns, but through it all, it's that building and that effort that makes it worthwhile, right? And so for me, it's a reminder to just appreciate the impact that I have on others, and not to underestimate my own power in any given situation to build and improve unity and cohesion, not to exacerbate divisions, right? That like in these spaces, I have a choice on how to proceed, right? And it's also for me like a reminder to make that commitment and to follow through, right? To see where that effort can lead us, right? And it makes me think of another mentor who said that there is no try, only do, right? That where I have grown the most and where my vision for the future has gotten the sharpest and where I've recommitted to making a change is when I've navigated these really hard moments, not in isolation, right, but in community with each other. And I can think about the coalitions, the organizations I've built, the campaigns that I've won and lost. And I think what sustains me is thinking back and thinking about the people that I worked with and knowing that like I learned a new way of being with you through this work, that I saw something that I did not see before in you, and that's a really beautiful thing to do. And I feel like I'm fortunate to feel like I see that every day in my relationship with Linda, right? And so yeah, that clip really spoke to me.
Wonderful, thank you. Sometimes the cultures of consumption and philanthropy might make it seem like our role in social justice is to pick which group is the best, but I hope in this dialogue, having people reference each other, reference historical movements in the past, reference dialogues that happened before, that we all get to see that in fact, it's not about us as independent organizations, but actually we are all deeply interconnected, and as our individual organizations become stronger, we become stronger. Given time, so this has been perfect the way it has, and certainly there's more to talk about. Given time, I want to kick it over to Seiji really quickly to share the results of the Social Justice Giving Circle survey that we did, and then ask the speakers to do final 1-minute go-arounds, including Joelle to close us out. Seiji?
Yeah, so we will be sharing more of what we learned, but I wanted to just share kind of a highlight, because for the past few months, we conducted a survey online of the broad landscape of social justice giving circles. And there's a lot of things that came out of that, both in terms of all of the different ways that giving circles are thinking about social justice and ways that they define themselves, but also in the areas that they are interested in, where they kind of have an appetite to learn and do more. So I just want to kind of share one data point, and then we'll be, through the Social Justice Giving Circle project and through Philanthropy Together, we'll be sharing some more of the findings and implications. But the one top line I wanted to share is just 95% of our participants, of the people who responded to the survey on behalf of their giving circle, said that Social Justice Giving Circle describes their giving circle, at least to some degree. So these are folks who think of themselves in social justice terms, but despite that 95% identity number, only 15% say that they've heard quite a bit about social justice best practices. So you have a group of folks who are thinking about themselves in terms of social justice, but are just really hungry to learn more about how to do that. So that's kind of the gap that I think intrigues all of us. So let me turn it back over to Mario.
Thanks, Seiji. And the slides are fascinating, so do keep in touch with us, and we'll share that. And I'd like to do a quick go around now, but also, if folks would be willing, Linda, Timmy, Louis, Ciciley, maybe at some other point we could get together again and I could ask the same question, film it, and then we could add that later on in the spirit of abundance. Yeah, should we go same order? Ciciley, Louis, Linda, Timmy?
Yeah, so I think I missed what the question was, Mario. Is this you like our final takes, so just like takeaways
Final
from
takeaway.
Okay. Great. Yeah, you know, I think in the spirit of centering love in this conversation, recognizing that love heals, right? And one of my favorite quotes from Bell Hooks, which was one of my suggested reads, was, we recover ourselves in the act and the art of loving. I think there's a lot of intersections of love in our aspirations and having the courage to be able to take our steps forward. And I just encourage folks to, find those places of love. Maybe it's not an intimate partner, but it's in these collective spaces where we can, really think about how, how we show up for each other. And so, I think that would be my takeaway is, think about where those places are love, and don't let uncertainty be, the limiting factor for you, right? Don't let it derail your progress. One of my friends, Shannon Cohen, often says, go in the strength you have. Some wisdom we get in the strength as we go, and some wisdom we get in the strength as we grow. And so I love that quote. That's Shannon Cohen. And I think it's part of this process.
Beautiful. And Joelle sharing some of the recommendations that our speakers have shared, so you get to reference those in the chat. Louis?
Yeah, thank you again for having me. I appreciate this, and I'll just leave with a recommendation, and that is, if you ever get the opportunity, if you want to see how these worlds organizing collides with love, is I highly recommend you check out the documentary Brother Outsider. It is about Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin is essential to the civil rights movement. He's a gay Black man, and so he's really pushed aside, but he's the one who's doing all the organizing. Other names that you might not be familiar with, people like Ella Baker, who organized from the 1930s into the 1960s, right? And had to be pushed aside. I would just, again, watch documentaries, read, and just know that the struggle is real, as people say, right? And every battle that you're fighting has been a battle that someone's fought before you, right? And they've created a pathway for you to build on.
Thank you. Linda?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Timmy and I have been together since I was 18, and people often ask us, like, how are you still together? It's been like almost 20 years. And I think the number one thing that I come back to is that we have allowed each other to evolve and grow, and be on a journey together in our personal relationship, but also in our political work. And I think about this, like, as I, and I've been in parenthood, and in my relationship to organizations, both like grassroots organizations, study groups, paid work, and like, how can we be in intentional relationship with people, with organizations that sustain us, that allow us to evolve, to allow us to grow, to elevate us and level up in whatever it is that we want to do, and leveling up in our social justice work, giving us more clarity in what our role is, but also in how to act. Are the relationships that we are in helping us grow our souls, as Grace Lee Boggs says? And I think with that, it's just like, hoping that, like, can open you up to whatever that's possible.
Thank you, Linda. Timmy?
Yeah, I just want to speak to what a lot of the other kind of panelists spoke to as well, like the importance of organization and working together as the building block of change, right? And I think for myself, like, when I first started doing student organizing and activism, I had someone share with me that the rule of three, that like alone, that you can't actually accomplish that much alone, right? And even as like a pair, you cannot accomplish this. But when you get to that point where you have three people working on something, that's an organization. That's how you hold yourself and others accountable, right? And I think in this sort of like very sort of like a capitalistic dog-eat-dog world that inflects and influences like the nonprofit and even movement sectors, there's this feeling that that you have to be this iconoclast that like leads alone, right? And I think what CC and Lewis and Linda have shared is that that's actually not how change works historically, and not actually how we want to lead, right? And that in coming together, we can do things that that I couldn't have dreamed of myself, right? That sort of like exciting potential that Eric Tang spoke about in that clip. And so I just want to just leave folks with this urging to build organization, be a part of organization, and to do more together that you could not imagine alone.
Great. Thank you, Timmy. Part of the charge we were given as the Social Justice Giving Circle Project was to begin to share what you all should do, not you all speakers, but those early in their political journeys. But from our organizing experiences, we know that that's the easy part. It's creating the desire part that's hard. We hope in this session, introducing you to these beautiful people, we might have helped nourish your desire a bit in this brief time we had together to be in community through shared work and struggle with Cece, Linda, Lewis, and Timmy. For those of you who are wanting a bit more, we thought we would leave you with some questions to use. Cultures of philanthropy often ask questions about what are your values? How do you want to make that visible to the world? What groups do you want to support? Based on that, what do you want to do? Here's our offering, another set of questions that gets to kind of the point about relationships that was just being spoken about. Whose struggle do you want to honor when you do this work? Whose strength do you want to honor? Who do you want to be proud of you when you do this work? Who do you want to become by doing this work? And with whom do you want to travel along this journey with? So that's our offering to all of you. And with that, I want to pass it on to a dear friend, colleague who has volunteered so much of her time along with Seiji to this work, Joelle, to close us out.
With 1 minute left before the final closing session of the We Give Summit, I want to thank all of our speakers today. And I want to thank everybody who attended all the giving circles with us, who've been on this journey since the first session we did many months ago. In the spirit of mutuality and learning, we want to hear the answers to those questions from you that Mario just shared. And we want to know how your journeys have unfolded in this time of civic awakening and political opening. You got to hear a lot about the journeys of the speakers here today. This is about mutuality. We want to hear from you. And we invite you to email us at politicaljourneys@gmail.com. If you reply to that, if you send an email to that email, we will promise to reply to you. We want to be in relationship with you. And speaking of relationships, what's next for this project is that we want to do a deeper dive with the social justice movement leaders that we've been speaking to, including the ones that you see here today, and others, about what is the best and most generative and powerful relationship that giving circles can have with social justice movements. And we want to take what we learn and we want to use it in future programming with giving circles and all of you. So just know that that's on our to-do list on our next phase of work together. So thank you all so much for being here, and we'll see you at the next session with Edgar Villanueva and Mijo Lee. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.